so I did not visit them. Mr. Speaker, this House must come up with a regulation which will regulate these institutions so that if it is a must, any rating, Mr. Speaker, to be done, it should be done according with the funding which we are given and the work which we normally do in this House and even in our committees. So, with that, I rest my case, Mr. Speaker.
Now, I think this one was not ranked because he must have been somewhere. Member for Nakuru Town East.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker.
We read about where he was.
Honourable Speaker, I want to join my colleague, especially Honourable Otiende Amolo. Honourable Speaker, I think it is important for us to realize that the rankings, I was ranked number 235. And I accept that position. Sometimes, Honourable Speaker, it's good for members of Parliament to accept some reality on the ground. I totally agree. Yes, now I understand from the experts like Chris Wamalwa on the parameters that are being used when you are doing a research. And that now, that changes my perception on what the opinion polls are all about. But I totally agree, Honourable Speaker, what the majority leader has brought, that it is time, a very high time, that we started bringing, we started regulating these opinion polls. And I think it is, Honourable Speaker, in the last Parliament, we had a different opinion when Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta was rated so highly, yet the other people are not finally won the election. So, Honourable Speaker, I think it is important for us to realize.
The following is a response to the statement which was sought by Honorable Professor Jacqueline Oduor regarding teenage pregnancies in the country. In the statement, she raised a few issues which were responded by the Cabinet Secretary as follows. Issue number 1. What measures are in place to protect teenagers from negative impact of social media, pornographic material, and sexual abuse during the COVID-19 lockdown? Which was responded to as follows. From the onset, let me emphasize the role of parents and guardians as the first point of call in the responsibility to protect our children. Government cannot police our homes. Parents and guardians have a huge role to play. The cybercrime units and child protection units of the Directorate of Criminal Investigation are mandated to prevent and respond to cybercrimes, including pornographic and social media. In addition, the government, through the Ministry of ICT, Innovation and Youth Affairs, has put in place the following measures. A, mapping, analyzing the existing apps on adolescent health and HIV information and their popularity among the youth. B, promoting utilization of existing virtual platforms for health messaging on adolescent health and HIV prevention strategies, and explore centralized hosting of the platforms. Use of SMS or Skiza tunes in partnership with social media. C, facilitating adolescents to develop their own health messages and apps. That is use of website, photo specific to the agenda, and include a link for back office email with officers responding to questions and auto response mail system. D, promoting use of innovations and technology for adolescent health promotion and reduction of teenage pregnancy, including 1, awareness creation materials, that is posters, flyers, with age-appropriate adolescent health messages. 2, engaging media, that is talk shows, print, TVs, radio, and social media. And 3, develop mobile phone app, web portal for young persons. Issue number 2, what specific reproductive health services has the government earmarked for teenagers to promote healthy living, discipline, and responsible conduct? Response: the Ministry of ICT, Health, and National Council on Population and Development have partnered in health promotion messaging services generated and disseminated through various media. 2, the Ministry of Education has included the adolescent sexual reproductive health and hygiene in the new competence-based curriculum, that is CBC program. 3, the Preventive and Promotional Health Department of the Ministry of Health has several initiatives towards the implementation of the National Adolescent and Sexual Health Policy. The policy aims to enhance the sexual reproductive health status of adolescents in Kenya and contribute towards realization of their full potential in national development. The policy intends to bring adolescent sexual and reproductive health and rights issues in the mainstream health and development. Issue number 3, what steps has the government taken to strengthen parental care and community protection mechanism to prevent and detect teenage pregnancies? Responded to as follows. The following are the steps being undertaken by the various MDAs. Roman 1, Ministry of Education. A, assessing and monitoring enforcement of the Gender in Education Policy 2015 through the Quality Assurance and Standards Officers. B, training of key stakeholders like the parents, head teachers, and the teaching and non-teaching staff, together with the pupils on the policy to minimize stigma. C, sharing of parental guidelines and materials developed by KICD and engaging parents association at county and national levels. And D, makes it a standing and mandatory agenda to discuss sessions on adolescent health and teenage pregnancy during Board of Management and Parents Associations meetings or any other parents meeting. 2, the Interministerial Technical Working Group. Now, this agency, the response was, it has developed a national standard information package for parents and guardians on adolescent health for schools, children's homes, refugee camps, Boston institutions, rescue centers, safe homes, and rehabilitation centers. B, initiated high-level advocacy on parental empowerment and engagement at national and county levels, including and not limited to faith-based communities, unions, and associations such as CUPET, NAT, and NSPD. C, instituted quarterly reporting by institutions of learning, primary, secondary, colleges, and adolescent health and teenage pregnancy. D, targeting parents with specific information from regions most affected by FGM, children marriage, gender-based violence, and other harmful traditional practices. E, development of sensitization package for community engaged on adolescent health of gatekeepers and opinion shapers, faith-based organizations, community-based organizations, and local and political administrative leaders on prevention of the teenage pregnancy. F, hold strategic meetings with key interested groups, that is transport associations like Boda Boda, Matatu, and so on, fishmongers, and others in collaboration with the Ministry of Transport. And G, established partnerships with the gatekeepers and opinion shapers. And in the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection, these are the measures: provision of cash transfers to caregivers of orphans and vulnerable children, and B, the draft Family Policy 2017, emphasizing on the parental responsibility with the following objectives, which is 1, enhance equal parental responsibility at home and in public sphere. 2, enhance positive parenting skills to nurture and protect children from exposure to sexual abuse and teenage sexual engagement, as well as alcohol and drug abuse, which are associated with teenage pregnancies. So in conclusion, Honorable Speaker, the statement ends like the following, with the following, sorry. Teenage pregnancy in Kenya is a challenge that often has immediate effects on our children, their educational opportunities, future implications for their social health and economic outcomes, and negatively impacts on them. However, this is an outcome shaped by a myriad of issues affecting our adolescent girls' life, including community norms on gender roles, violence and the value of girls, barriers to formal education, household poverty, lack of economic independence, experience of violence, and social isolation. For girls to achieve well-being in early and late adolescence, no single sector intervention, which is whether in education or health or wealth creation or the prevention of violence, will be adequate. Therefore, it is critical to intervene before the myriad of issues that girls face result in outcomes that are irreversible or are costly to compensate for or reverse. The root causes of these vulnerabilities work in tandem to create the current situation for adolescent girls, cultural norms that do not empower women and girls, acceptance of violence, poverty, social isolation, economic vulnerability, lack of voice in society, and therefore the interventions that will enable girls in early adolescence to make a safe and healthy transition through adolescence and into adulthood must be integrated as well. Through the Interministerial Working Group on Adolescent Health, constituted on 20th March 2019, it is our hope that the issue will be sufficiently addressed. I thank you.
Professor Duan.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. And Honorable Speaker, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the Chair for the comprehensive report. And Honorable Speaker, as I do indeed agree with the response and the stipulated suggestions, allow me, Honorable Speaker, to say that a crisis is the best time to find and utilize what could be seen to be attractive solutions. And Honorable Speaker, the bigger the problem, the bigger the crisis, really the bigger the opportunity to make a lasting difference. Honorable Speaker, a crisis helps to discover problems. And it is indeed clear in our country that as we now celebrate or keep hoping that we are going to open schools, it would be useful in a context where, Honorable Speaker, we have just emphasized the importance of data, to recognize that we are going to find that there are going to be very many of those girls who will not find their way to school. And Honorable Speaker, projecting ahead, we are going to find that a whole generation is lost. It is for this reason that, as I appreciate this very particular substantive response, especially the opening acknowledgement that parents really are the first line of duty, and that government really cannot take the place of parents. I'd like, Honorable Speaker, based on my experience having served in government as the permanent secretary, to say that government is the closest that our children, when they're in a crisis like this, would have to not only comprehensively and in a sustainable manner addressing the issue. And we cannot, in a way, just leave the matter at the perspective of dealing with technical working groups, of looking at the Gender and Education Committee, of, in a way, doing business as usual. It is for this reason, Honorable Speaker, that I would urge the Chair of Labour, and indeed I appreciate the manner in which it was recognized that this matter cuts across not just Labour, ICT, education, but I would like, Honorable Speaker, to address an area and a ministry that I noticed was not in any way addressed, and this is the Ministry of Sports, Culture, and Heritage. Honorable Speaker, when we look at what is happening now, and when we look at the three critical areas, we will see that the tendency now is to push that we just let our young people get access to reproductive health information, and in quite a number of cases, to enable them to see that this is a right. I do not deny that we need to get to have information timely distributed. But, Honorable Speaker, I am of the view that given that we are a House that not only looks at issues of legislation, but also seeks to oversight and to represent the voice of those that we serve, that we would like to deal with the plight that our teenagers face, because a number of them, Honorable Speaker, are going to end up getting access to this reproductive health information and are really not going to be in a position to deal with the kind of responsibility that goes along. And so, Honorable Speaker, as I appreciate this response, I would like to urge that government is the only framework that has outreach capacity. And, Honorable Speaker, we have the Protection of Traditional Knowledge and Cultural Expressions Act 2016, a very act, Honorable Speaker, that sought to ensure that we, to the extent that it is relevant, use indigenous or traditional knowledge to solve problems. It is my humble submission, Honorable Speaker, that as we deal with this crisis of teenage pregnancies, I would want to urge that we do not let the matter just rest on issues of policy, and we do not spend time and all the resources that we have in the inter-ministerial working groups seeking to observe and to follow, that we do not stigmatize the teenagers who unfortunately might then find themselves in the family way, but we much more specifically look to how we are equipping our parents. Honorable Speaker, in my experience as PS in the Ministry of Gender, Children and Social Development, parents had a major cry. And Honorable Speaker, parents were asking, why are you government allowing NGOs to put our children in a point where the only thing they can think of is their rights? And sometimes, even as they are talking about their rights, they are not even clear of what their responsibilities are. I would like, Honorable Speaker, to urge the Chair of Labour to see the way in which there can be indeed a thinking outside the box of these interministerial working groups, in particular to get to allow parents to have a sense of skills that would not just be based on guidelines that sometimes, unfortunately, are only policy-based or might be informed by foreign ideologies, but to look to the elders, to the grandmothers, to opinions that we have. And so, Honorable Speaker, I thank the Chair. I appreciate the effort. I am in particular happy that the Ministry is recognizing, especially the Ministry of Labour, that they would like to enhance positive parental skills, and they would like to nurture and protect children from exposure to sexual abuse. I'd like to urge the Ministry that there is a breakdown of values, and that some of these teenagers, Honorable Speaker, are getting impregnated right within the family by their relatives, something that is not being discussed because it is seen to be taboo, but which really is a reflection of the way that our society has completely broken down from the social values. Allow me, Honorable Speaker, as I sit down as a member of the very respectable county of Siaya, a county where, Honorable Speaker, there is a joke that if you throw a stone, it will land on the head of a professor or a researcher. I have listened with concern, and I want to say that I express great regret that we would have a situation where a report would be tabled that does not seem to observe or follow the research parameters. I, however, want to submit, Honorable Speaker, that I am always a student, and getting to sit in this honorable house sometimes might make you get a little change of view with regards to how research can be interpreted of what it is that would be seen to be the responsible or the actual relevant parameters for research. And so I just want to indeed express deep regret, as other members have, with the manner in which this Infotrack came up with the research, and appreciate, Honorable Speaker, the guidance that you gave. However, I hope that we can remember, as I have learned sitting in this House, Honorable Speaker, that the kind of research that sometimes takes place in the academia and in those other areas might not necessarily be relevant or appropriate for a political context such as this one. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I want to appreciate the response.
Next statement by the Chair, Departmental Committee on Education and Research. The Chair of Education and Research. She was supposed to to issue a statement in response to a request by the Honorable Mwadime Andrew. Well, I see both of them are absent, not desiring to be present, I believe. So they can go and meet wherever they are and then do some little bit of research, I suppose. Yeah, but the Honorable Omboko is not in possession of the statement. But the Honorable Omboko Milemba said he was somewhere in some church, somewhere in the village. So that might be very good there. Now, about this statement, he may not be aware. And now, if we tell him to respond, you might reduce his rating. Yes. Let's go to the next order.
Order number 8, motion. Report on the status of implementation of legislation, petitions, and resolutions.
Honorable Olekenta.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I beg to move that the House adopt the report of the Committee on Implementation on the status of implementation of the legislations, petitions, and resolutions passed by the House, laid on the table of the House on Tuesday, June 30, 2020. Honorable Speaker, this is in line with the committee's mandate pursuant to Standing Order 209-2. Honorable Speaker, this is an omnibus report covering various House resolutions. It is the second one the committee has tabled, having tabled a similar one in 2018. Unfortunately, the same has not been brought for debate, and I request the Business House Committee to expedite the resumption of that report or to the reintroduction. Honorable Speaker, the report covers the following 6 motions, 6 committee reports, and 19 reports on petitions. And for the record, and for the benefit and information of the concerned members, I'd like to say the motions, the 6 motions are as follows. 1, resolution that the national government formulates and implements a policy on the criteria for recruitment and remuneration of village elders. The motion was proposed by Honorable George Murugara MP and was passed by the House on 3rd April 2019. 2, resolution that all disciplined forces should give first priority to National Youth Service graduates during recruitment. The motion was proposed by Honorable Michael Moshera MP and was passed by the House on 18th April 2018. 3, resolution on the review of terms and conditions for recruitment, remuneration, and deployment of National Service reservists in arid and semi-arid areas. The motion was proposed by Honorable Olays Lentoimaga MP and was passed by the House on 26 September 2019. 4, the resolution that the government exercises its power to protect Kenya from harassment by external threats and takes adequate measures to ensure that Kenyan territorial integrity is guaranteed and safeguarded, including through the establishment of a naval force to man the Lake Victoria waters. The motion was tabled by the Honorable John Badi MP. 5, 5, inquiry into procurement and implementation of the accessible goods management EGM's system for printing, supply, and delivery of security revenue stamps, complete with track and trace system, and an integrated production accounting system by the Kenya Revenue Authority. 6, report on the sessional paper number 1 of 2017 of the National Land Use Policy from the Ministry of Lands and Physical Planning. Honorable Speaker, the reports on petitions are as follows. Report on petition on the challenges in the implementation of the Social Assistance Program, Samburu North Constituency by Honorable Alois Lentomaga, MP. Report on petition on the proposed demolitions of buildings for purposes of expansion of Likoni Lungalunga Road. The petition was tabled by Honorable Kadwi Mwashetani, the member for Lungalunga Constituency. 3, report on petitions on the construction of speed bumps and the establishment of rumble strips between Madea and Rangala trading centers along Kisumu-Busia Highway. The petition was tabled by Honorable James Opio Andai, MP, Unguja Constituency, on behalf of the residents of Unguja Constituency. 4, report on petition for the erection of bumps and construction of footbridges at Kangoro bus stop along Embu Meru Highway. The petition was tabled by Honorable Onesimus Mudhoni Njuki. I think that was much earlier, or maybe they've mistaken because there is a new MP. 5, report on petition on the upgrading of Old Mombasa Road, Masai Road A, B, and C in Nairobi County to bitumen standards. The petition was tabled, I think, earlier also. Petition on the erection of speed bumps along Kakamega Mumias Road. The same was also, is also in the report. The same with the Bomas Ongata Road by the Honorable Manche. Petition on the delay carpeting of section of Meru Maua Road. This was by Honorable Cyprian Kubai Iringo. Kabati Kagundo Bridge by Honorable Mbui. Report on the dilapidated state of sections of Karatina Jambo Road. This was also in the report. Report on the petition on tamaking of Gitu, Makfas, Matangani, Idangani, Kathiani, Mayua. Report on behalf of the residents of Molem Ward and Bakasi on irregular allocation of LR number 113793. There is also the report on petition on rectification of records in Registrar for Lands, parcel, in regard to parcel number Igembe and Leni Athi by Honorable Kubai Irungo. There is also the issue of the settlement of Ndidi Subugas quotas. There is also the report on the public petition regarding implementation of delocalization policy by the Teacher Service Commission. The petition was tabled by Honorable Patrick Mariro on 24th, 2019 on behalf of teachers in Laikipia West Constituency. The report on petition regarding lifting of the ban on logging and harvesting of the mangroves in Lamu. The petition was tabled in the House by the Honorable Captain Rueda Obo, Lamu. 17, report on petition on alleged impending demolition of buildings along the Madaki Zinkitini Road in Pata Island. This was also brought by the Honorable Captain Rueda Obo. The report on the petition of oil marketers companies involved in supply and distribution of jet A fuel.
Point of order.
Yeah.
Yes. What is out of order, Honorable Miri? Or the above accord?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm sorry for interrupting my good classmate who is making a very good presentation. But we are just consulting here with my two colleagues, and we were of great concern that there's something that took the whole world by storm and was calming, especially after a heated earlier session. And so we are just wondering, when is the Parliament of Kenya going to do its own version of Jerusalem? To just calm the Jerusalem challenge. And I am willing to be the chair. Yes. And with the speaker, we want a Jerusalem caucus that, and with the majority leader who is saying no because he doesn't know how to do that. Led by no other than and led by the speaker of the National Assembly. We must do a Jerusalem challenge to bring calmness.
Order, Honorable, Honorable Jennifer want to contribute to a point of order. There is the order, Honorable Jennifer. Whatever that it is, that the Speaker is being invited to participate. The Jerusalem challenge, I can tell the majority leader is not even sure what that is. There needs to be a bit of education. Order, Honorable Jennifer. We are not going to entertain that one. But as I can tell, Honorable Miriam Odhiambo will close the floor and talk to majority leader. So, information to who? Order. Let's have. Let us Honorable Miriam Odhiambo will close the floor and talk to majority leader. Majority leader need some information and education. Honorable Lekenta, please let's proceed.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I hope you are going to add me the minutes that you have lost, because it's a fairly long report, and it's very important for the House to know the status of their resolution, the House resolutions. So, the 18 report on the petition on oil marketers companies involved in the supply and distribution of jet A1 fuel. The petition was tabled before the House by the Honorable Speaker on behalf of Mrs. Pius Omolo and Agoy Fidel on behalf of oil marketers in the country. The last one is report on the petition regarding fraudulent medical bill issued by MP Shah Hospital on account of treatment of the late Matilda Anyango, and the petition was filed by the Consumer Federation of Kenya regarding fraudulent medical bills by MP Shah Hospital. Honorable Speaker, we called several stakeholders. We got submissions from ministries concerned, and just to maybe talk about a few of the resolutions before I go into the challenges and other issues. The resolution on the fast-tracking of the implementation of National Employment Authority Act, number 3 of 2016, the Act has been operationalized. The resolution that the national government formulates and implements policy on the criteria for recruitment and remuneration of village elders. Honorable Speaker, this has been facing headwinds because, for one, there is no budgetary allocation and there is no legal framework to enforce it, though it's very important for, it's actually very important as far as assisting the chiefs and assistant chiefs in their maintenance of security in their areas of jurisdiction. The report, on the report of the Departmental Committee on Environment and Natural Resources on the inquiry into forest resource management and logging activities in Kenya, I am happy to report that the implementation studies that the moratorium on harvesting of forest plantations from public forest is still in force, and the restoration of the unstocked areas is ongoing. The other issue on that same is that the implementation status actually on securing of funds to ensure that these activities actually protected and assisted is that through tree planting campaigns, and actually the same has been going on with the implementation by KWS and KEFRI, among other government agencies. Honorable Speaker, so the implementation is actually ongoing. On the report on the petition on challenges in the implementation of social assistance program in Samburu North, there has been problems on that one, but I think it is being worked on, and it's ongoing, but very slow, especially because of the distances these will have to travel to get their tokens. On the Mollem Ward issue, that was brought by Honorable Seuri, on the status of implementation, the Ministry of Lands and Physical Planning waived payment of all statutory fees for processing and issuance of the title deeds to the beneficiaries under the National Titling Program. The survey has been done by the Nairobi City County government and is in the process of quality control. The Ministry of Lands and Physical Planning will proceed to issue titles once the Nairobi City government forwards the leases to the ministry. The implementation is ongoing, albeit at a very slow pace. Honorable Speaker, in its deliberations, the committee observed that lack of legal frameworks to guide government policies hampers efficient implementation and operations of policies. Also, inadequate budgetary allocation hinder implementation of House resolutions. Further, late and incomplete responses by ministry usually lead to back and forth communication with the committee, thus delaying reporting to the House. Additionally, most of the motions, legislations introduced in the House are not subjected to a thorough scrutiny on the viability of the implementation. This makes the House pass resolutions that are not in line with existing government agenda and midterm policies. Honorable Speaker, the committee also observed that the inordinate delay of occasioned by court cases is hampering the implementation of House resolutions, and consequently the committee is unable to conclusively report on the implementation of affected resolutions, especially under the Ministries of Land and Environment and Forest. Honorable Speaker, the committee... Honorable Sanko, please. Honorable Speaker, the committee, after deliberations, made the following recommendations. That one, clear legislation should be developed to implement various government policies. Two, the National Assembly should develop an online tracking tool for the implementation of House resolutions as a matter of priority for effective follow-up of implementation of House resolutions. Three, the National Assembly should enhance its scrutiny of laws, resolutions, and motions to ensure that resolutions passed are implementable. Four, the House, and by extension, committee should ensure all resolutions passed are specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound to ensure they are implementable and for effective follow-up of the same. Honorable Speaker, sometimes resolutions are made that are actually meant to be directed to county governments, which are impossible to implement. There are also, when some members move motions, they urge the government to do things which is not enforceable. So, Honorable Speaker, we have done several reports, and I would like to urge the House Committee to, Business Committee, to really bring those ones to for debate in the House. I know there are many members who have been asking me about the implementation of their motions, their laws, and everything. I'd like to advise them that we have already tabled several reports. Maybe they can look at them, scrutinize, and find out whether they are not there. If they are not there, then they can always come back to us. I know Honorable Wamalwa is one of them, and we are following up your matter. And I just want to request the members that we need to work together as far as citizens are concerned. Please read the report. It is detailed. And if you have anything that you need us to follow up, we shall do so. Honorable Speaker, I would like now I beg to move and now request Honorable Osoti, who is my Vice Chair, to second this motion. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Who is seconding?
Honorable Osoti.
Yes, Honorable Osoti, please.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry I didn't carry my card today. Mr. Speaker, I beg to second the adoption of the report on the submission from stakeholders regarding the implementation status of legislation, petitions, and resolutions passed by the House as moved by my able chairperson, Honorable Ole Kenta. Mr. Speaker, I start by one, congratulating the committee for the good work they have done. Yes, I have to. Mr. Speaker, this is among the many reports that this committee has tabled, and I'm happy that now the House Business Committee allowed us to debate this particular motion that is actually an omnibus of 6 motions, 6 committee reports, and 19 petitions. As alluded to by my chair, we have also a series of other reports which we have tabled, and they have not been debated. But I want to encourage the House that I think the Committee of Implementation is a very important committee to this House, because it is a committee that reports back on the status of the issues that have been adopted by this House. So I think it will be very important to prioritize their debate so that members know that actually they are not legislating in vain. Mr. Speaker, this report was compiled after intensive scrutiny of written submission from government agencies, from various stakeholders, so many meetings with the ministries and stakeholders, scrutiny of records of evidence, and in some cases, visits to some of these places which are contained in the various reports that have been adopted by this House. But, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that we, as a committee, we are facing a number of challenges. I think most of them have been alluded to by the chair. But one challenge, Mr. Speaker, is court cases. Court cases that arise
in the middle of our examination of some report, and others arise immediately. Some reports are adopted by this House. And this really has impeded our work and slowed down some of the work that we do as a committee. And some of these court cases are unnecessary and sometimes are a way of interfering with the parliamentary independence. Because this House, just like we don't deal with matters which are sub judice, I don't think it is proper for the courts to appear like they're injecting Parliament from carrying out its responsibility. And one case in point is the case of Mombasa Cement, which has been pending in the committee for almost a year now because of a flurry of cases that keep on coming. The other challenge is a challenge of quality of recommendation. Mr. Speaker, I think at one point the former leader of majority alluded to this fact, that we would need to retrain our clerks so that the recommendations that come out in those reports are recommendations that are specific and actionable. Sometimes it's very difficult for the Committee of Implementation to deal with the recommendations that are vague. Because if you give recommendation that is vague, you would expect to get a vague answer. And that has been one of the challenges. So moving forward, I would like to recommend that committees, through the clerks, focus on giving us recommendations that are actionable and specific and to the point. The other issue, Mr. Speaker, is notification from the clerk's office. You know, the standing order says that this committee can take up a matter 60 days after that matter has been adopted by this House. Mr. Speaker, we find ourselves engaging in a fishing expedition, looking for what to handle. I think what should happen is that 60 days after a matter has been dispensed by this House, the clerk's office needs to write to the committee and say, we have a particular question, was asked in the House, these were the responses, these were the undertaking, committee should deal with it. But in most cases, you find us looking for that ourselves. So I think we need a seamless process from the clerk's office to us. The other challenge is petitions from aggrieved parties. We make recommendations here, and then because one of the parties who has been adversely mentioned goes to court because he was not given a chance to be heard. That we have seen petitions in this House, some of it we have passed it, especially touching on the sugar report. We have
you just get 2 minutes now that you are seconding,
the issue of no responses, especially when we write to some ministries, asking on the issue of implementation of acts of parliament. We do not get answers from ministries because one of the roles of this committee is to follow up on the implementation status of acts of parliament. We have a series of various acts of parliament which have not been implemented. But we would need to work extra hard to get answers from ministries on why agencies or even ministries are not able to implement acts of parliament. Otherwise, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that this is a good report. We would strive to work more, especially on issues like budget, which we pass in this House. Pick and pack reports, which the chairman has agreed that that will be our next focus as a committee. The issue of questions, answers to questions which have undertakings in it. I think also this is one issue that has come up here severally, and we need support so that we can get these matters handled. For those few remarks, Mr. Speaker, I second. Thank you.
Very well, honorable members. I would propose a question, which is that this House adopts the report of the Committee on Implementation on the status of implementation of registrations, petitions, and resolutions passed by the House, laid on the table of the House on Tuesday, June 30th, 2020. Honorable Ole Sankok.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, the implementation of the policies and legislative that we pass in this House is very important. Honorable Speaker, so I stand to support Honorable Olekenda and his committee for the marvelous job that they have been doing. Honorable Speaker, I also have some legislative framework that are still pending, Honorable Speaker, but I'm sure they are up their game and they will be able to follow to the latter, that whatever that we have passed in this House is implemented. Honorable Speaker, so that the House does not act in vain. Honorable Speaker, with those very few remarks, I do support. Thank you.
Honorable Amalwa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity. Mr. Speaker, the Committee of Implementation is a very important committee as far as this House is concerned. First and foremost, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the Chair and the committee members. At least we've seen some light in this Committee of Implementation. Mr. Speaker, Parliament cannot legislate in vain. There are some bills, Mr. Speaker, that were passed in the last Parliament, and I'm happy the Leader of Majority is here. When I came in the last Parliament, Mr. Speaker, we sponsored a bill, and it's now an act, Fertilizer Board, because we know the importance of fertilizer in this country, Mr. Speaker. And up to now, we have no Fertilizer Board in place. I'm saying this so that they take note of this. It is supposed to come under the Ministry of Agriculture, Mr. Speaker. We know very well this is an agriculture country, and agriculture can only move when there is availability of fertilizer. And this is a big problem to our farmers, Mr. Speaker. Why is it that this bill, which was sent by His Excellency the President, around 2014, 2015, up to now, we do not have a Fertilizer Board? Mr. Speaker, there is also a motion that we passed here, Mr. Speaker, under the HEROES Act. The bill, there's a motion that was passed in the Senate, Mr. Speaker, that with devolution, we should have a public university in every county. Mr. Speaker, in line with that motion that was passed in the Senate, and in line with the HEROES Act, I brought a motion on the floor of this House, Mr. Speaker, to upgrade Kitale Technical College, Mr. Speaker, to be upgraded to become a university and to be renamed Wamala Kijana University of Science and Technology, Mr. Speaker. This issue was passed. The minister came on the floor of the House in the committee level, and the technical college was upgraded, Mr. Speaker, because of that motion, to become a national polytechnic. And it was on the final end of becoming a university, but we said as we wait for the upgrading to become a university, it should be renamed to Wamala Kijana University of Science and Technology. Up to now, it has not yet been renamed, and it has not yet been upgraded. But however, we thank the ministry because it was upgraded from a technical to now a national polytechnic. Mr. Speaker, there's so much that goes on. Look at the issue of COVID-19 funds. Mr. Speaker, there are a lot of issues that were put across by His Excellency the President to cushion Kenyans. The Committee of Implementation, we expected you to bring a report and tell us about the issue of COVID. Like the funds, Mr. Speaker, that have been misappropriated in KEMSA. This is a very serious matter. And we expect this committee to prioritize its work, Mr. Speaker. We need these urgent reports, particularly on the COVID issue, because a lot of money, Mr. Speaker, has been misappropriated. The CEO has been suspended. We need you to summon the board so that you'll be able to understand, Mr. Speaker, so that we can understand the implementation status and the impact. This committee is a very powerful committee, Mr. Speaker. And you want them to be facilitated, Mr. Speaker, by the PSC, as is stipulated under Article 127. Parliament is here legislating, but we cannot be a laughing stock, Mr. Speaker. We want whatever is passed on the floor of this House to see it implemented. And it can only be done if this Committee of Implementation can be empowered. I really want to thank Honorable Kenta and Honorable Sosi. We can see some life in this committee, Mr. Speaker. It is indeed a very important committee that we must be able to support, and I'm also happy with the Leader of Majority. He's here, and you can see he has fitted in the shoes very well, Mr. Speaker. And I want to thank Honorable Kimunya. He's on top of things. We are happy about this. They have picked up very well with Honorable Wangwe. You can see the leadership has moved on very well because they are committed, and we are here to support them because we are happy with the work that they are doing, you know. And as we move forward, Mr. Speaker, now that we've discussed about this issue of Infotrack, it will also be nice, this Committee of Implementation, to move with speed. and even summon those people, because Parliament has exercised themselves. They've talked about this issue. So move quickly, summon them, because tomorrow we are going to see other pollsters coming up, Mr. Speaker, without clear parameters. And this is going to mess up the entire country. We know very well 2020 is not far. The BBI report, once it's come out, I've seen some people bring pollsters. And once we put mechanisms in place, Mr. Speaker, it's going to bring sanity. It's going to bring professionalism, Mr. Speaker. We support this, Mr. Speaker, and I thank you and I support.
Honorable Mutunga, member for Tigania West. And honorable members, just remind you, you have 5 minutes, at least maximum of 5 minutes, so that you are able to organize your thoughts accordingly.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for the opportunity to speak to this motion. Honorable Speaker, today is an important day for Kenya because a lot has gone on in terms of legislation and much has not been done. We do laws in this House and the laws are not implemented. Honorable Speaker, I would like to specifically touch on matters agriculture. Honorable Speaker, in the year 2013, 2 laws were passed by this House. This is the AFA Act and the Crops Act. The Crops Act presupposed that there would be an amalgamation of the former boards into one, and that was done. Honorable Speaker, AFA was formed. AFA was formed without a board. To date, there is no board that should guide that particular institution. Right now, what we are doing is disengage or dismember AFA into individual boards. We have been discussing the law on, the bill on the sugar board. We have been discussing the tea board. We will soon be discussing the coffee board. We will then be discussing the horticultural board. We will also go back to discuss the oil and nuts. We will discuss the fibers and so on. And then the question is, if this House passed a law that presupposed that we should have a board called Agriculture and Food Authority, why did the ministry not put together a board that would guide that particular institution? Without a board, no decisions can be made. And an interim management committee was set up to make sure that this law was implemented. This law had a specific deadline upon which it would have become effective, whether they wanted it or not. Upon approaching that deadline, some hurried mechanisms were put in place. And then an interim management committee, which I happen to be a member, was set up. And the law was more or less implemented. But then the remaining part of the executive was not done. Appointment of the board, we even recruited a chairperson, which was part of the terms of reference. And this chairperson was not given the job. Agriculture sector is more or less stalled because nothing happens in as far as these boards are concerned. The entire boards were collapsed into subdirectorates or directorates under the AFA, and these directorates are still interim. The CEO of AFA is interim. All the members of staff are interim. Everybody is interim. Interim people don't make serious decisions. And this is a serious matter that needs to be looked into. So as the Committee on Implementation of Legislations takes up effect, as they seek to be supported so that they may be able to do their job very well, Honorable Speaker, I seek the support of this House for this committee to do its work, because we cannot be having laws that are not implemented. There is a lot of hue and cry in the sector saying that the AFA as an institution is not performing. But it is not AFA as an institution which has failed to perform. It's because the institution is not supported effectively. If you have no board, how do you perform? Now we are going to disengage and form very many other boards. The question is, how many boards shall we form? The crops in this country, or the commodities grown in this country, are very many. We cannot have as many boards as there are commodities. That would be quite irrelevant and quite costly. So as a nation and as a country, we should focus on implementing these laws so that we can be able to have a form or a frame that can be followed for purposes of having good, yielding results from the work that we do. That's not the only law that has not been implemented. Many others have come up, and they are even being repealed before they can be implemented. And that is the work of this committee. Having said that, Honourable Speaker, I do support that this committee is given the relevant or requisite support that they need so that they can be effective. And the effectiveness of this committee needs to be checked in view of how are we rolling out implementation of the laws or the acts that we pass in this House. And we should be having, Honourable Speaker, we should demand for a report, a regular report, maybe on a quarterly basis, to show the extent to which we are implementing the laws that we pass in this particular House. Honourable Speaker, I do support. Thank you.
Honourable Odhiambo Akoth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to support. And Mr. Speaker, I want to commend the committee for a good work that they've done. Mr. Speaker, perhaps the challenge we face as a House is to make sure that we put punitive measures for different ministries that are not implementing the work of this House. Mr. Speaker, I had the opportunity to serve in the 10th Parliament. Maybe because of the way Parliament was configured, it was easier to hold the cabinet secretaries accountable. Members would refuse to engage with their own issues on the floor when they don't act. But when we just speak here and ministries are not responding to what we are dealing with, then it's actually making our work as members very futile. Mr. Speaker, just before you called me, I was actually reading a comment that somebody is mentioning in relation to Rwanda, and they are saying that in Rwanda, during this COVID period, they have built 22,000 schools, while in Kenya, instead, we are having COVID millionaires. And Mr. Speaker, it's not because we have not appropriated money for classrooms. The money has been appropriated. I know as we sit in budget, we have said we are going to actually call the respective ministries so that we get an update. But sometimes, even our bureaucracy is too much that you might find that the COVID is over and the monies that were appropriated for specific purposes no longer make sense. So what we need is for this committee to work very closely with the relevant committees that are oversighting specific departments, just to make sure that the things that Parliament does actually takes effect. I was even shocked, Mr. Speaker, recently to see that there's a bill we worked on very, very closely with the late Honorable Joyce Laboso, the social security or social safety bill, that seeks to actually cushion a lot of the vulnerable women who are poor, children, during these times. In fact, a lot of it also has to do with Honorable Professor Jacqueline Oduol was talking about. But unfortunately, we are actually now bringing the bill to repeal it before it's even implemented. Now, what sense does that make, honestly? At least even when we want to repeal something, let it go through even a process of implementation for 1 month, even 2 months. But this bill has never been operationalized, so we don't know how good or bad it is, and we are not even giving any alternatives, but we're already seeking to repeal it. So, Mr. Speaker, what I would suggest is that as Parliament, we need to find a way to have teeth with which to bite so that we are taken seriously, so that we are not like a rubber stamp for the executive. Otherwise, Mr. Speaker, I do support and yet again congratulate the committee. Thank you.
Honorable Majority Leader.
Honorable Speaker, I rise to support the report on the Committee on Implementation on the status of the various legislation, motions, petitions, and resolutions, and to say I'm happy that at last we were able to slot them in, because they were being bashed that they are not working, but we were probably guilty at the House business that we were not giving you the time, and now at least you have updated members. The sad thing is that the members being updated are not here, and tomorrow they'll be asking us the same thing: what is the status of my bill? And I'm not even sure how many of them will have read this report. But so that's how life is. When people have it, they don't want it. When they don't have it, they ask for it. I also commend the committee for work they've done. And just going to some of the findings that they have come up with, I think one of the things that they observe is this, they call the lack of legal frameworks to guide government policies, which they believe hampers the efficient implementation and operations of policies. Now, I'll leave the issue of budgetary allocations, because we in this House are the ones who actually do the budgetary allocations. And I know it will always be a standard excuse that we did not have money to implement the policies, but that should be factored in at least in the next year when ministries or the MDS should be coming and saying, we need so much money to implement certain things. So that lack of money should perhaps not be an excuse given to the committees, because ministries have a choice, have a chance every year to prioritize what they need. And if something is worth implementing, they should prioritize it in the budget. But looking through the bit about the late and incomplete responses, I know this is a standard thing. Committees will rush to do a report here. And by the time they do a report, the ministry then comes back later to give. And I've been seeing even this, even when on some of the bills that are in the process. The ministries will give a set of amendments. When the committee has finished, they bring another set. Or like on the miscellaneous, which was published, then the ministry started coming back and saying, we don't want this published, we don't want this published, until I said, why did you bring it in the first place? So there's that disconnect between what happens. But the long and short of it all is perhaps to just ask, the one thing that we can control is these legal frameworks. And I would like to urge the chair and his committee perhaps to identify which are these key legislation that we need to amend to create those missing frameworks. Because I've always said that our work as an oversight, our work as Parliament, is not to recommend that DCI takes action. He was going to do it anyway, right? Is to identify where are the loopholes, where are the legal loopholes that we need to seal so that a mistake is not repeated in future. That is the work we have as members of Parliament. So in all these things, the individual committees have come up with the resolutions. Now, the Committee on Implementation is in a unique situation of looking at it from a bird's eye view and identifying some commonality in the weaknesses that is forcing things not to be implemented. So you can identify which is this overarching law that we need to amend so that we force implementation and we don't say that because there's lack of a proper legal framework, it's impeding on implementation. I think the other thing that the committee has identified, and I agree with them, is on this issue of the motions and legislations, again, not being in tandem with some of the government policies, and hence, when the two of them are at cross purposes, it's the ministry will always go and say, we cannot implement this because it's against our policy. And again, I want to urge the committee to simultaneously look at that and say, how do we capture that upfront? I'll look at it later because I think one of the other things the committee also said is that we find some of these resolutions and motions being unimplementable. Now, since we all sit here when the motions are being drafted and the recommendations coming, perhaps there's a challenge I would want to throw to the committee that before the House pronounces itself, that members of the committee should perhaps act as a quality control committee, that they can look at these recommendations that are being brought to the floor of the House and decide that this is not going to be implementable. So bring in an amendment to ensure that we don't end up making the committee do a lot of work for something that is not implementable, or giving hope to the Kenyans that the House has passed, that the following shall be done, only knowing it's not implementable. That perhaps we should now work in as one new House and have the Committee of Implementation not just waiting for reports to report on the implementability or the status of the implementation, but to proactively intervene at the point of a report being tabled in this House and almost tell the chair that this report cannot be done. And that could be done, Honorable Speaker, with perhaps some more technical expertise at the secretariat level, that we almost have In fact, I would have thought the committee would be recommending, apart from just clerks being trained, that we have a quality control component that will be looking at the quality of the report before it comes here. Is it implementable? So that we don't be seen to be legislating in vain. Because it's so unfortunate if we come up with a resolution here and then we say this could not be implemented because it's not implementable. And I like the fact that you flagged some of those things, and with some solid examples, we could then use them as part of learning and developing the necessary capacity to judge what is implementable and what is not. Not necessarily for us, but even for those who come after this house, to be able to see that this is the quality of our resolution that can be implemented. Below this, if it goes below that threshold, the committee will be told, we will not accept that report on the floor of the House unless you amend, it's thrown away by the House, because otherwise you'll be wasting one another's time. I'm also happy that in terms of, I would also want to recommend the chair that pick up some of those things, and we can give you some time within the framework of the liaison committee so that you're able to share some of those examples with the chairs, or when we have the next leadership meeting. So that, because we may be blaming the clerks, that the clerks are not doing the reports in a certain way. But it's not the clerks who move these reports in this house. It's not the clerks who sign. It's the committee and the chairs. And we want to build a capacity at the chair level, at the committee level, so that they own that report and don't come and say, it is our clerk who drafted it in a certain way. I mean, clerks will give you a draft, but what you do with it is up to the committee. And I think that's what perhaps we might share within the liaison and within the leadership meetings. What are some of the issues you've picked up on some of those reports that are not good, reports that are disharmonious with the government policies, reports that should never have seen the light of day of the House, so that we can use that as part of our learning process and make it better into the future. So once again, I want to thank the committee and commend and encourage you to plow through all the other reports. At least you put to rest a batch of reports, and so many of them. Let members know the others, so they stop asking for what happened to my report. And hopefully also that the members will be here next time when you're doing this report, so that they don't keep asking when you've already done the work. Thank you, and congratulations once again.
Honorable, yeah.
Thank you very much, Speaker. I would like to say at the offset that, and I want to congratulate the chair, one, for his dedication to work as chair of the implementation, and the vice chair and the team that we work with. I think we have a very robust, very good team that really wants to ensure that Parliament succeeds. The work of this Parliament going forward actually rises or falls on this committee. If this committee does not do its work, then Parliament work might be in vain. But because this committee is there, it's possible to ensure that we, as a Parliament, we enforce the decisions of this committee, because essentially this is why this committee is here. That when Parliament passes resolutions, within 60 days, this committee should be able to check on whether those decisions have been implemented. But I think the story behind the story that is there currently is that 60 days go, 90 days, 100 until a session of Parliament ends. But a lot of the things that we pass in this House are not implemented. And every time here when we bring a motion in this Parliament, there'll be one or two members who will say that, you see, we discuss these motions and pass them here, but nothing happens. And that's a statement that indicates Parliament's work, that we are unable to enforce or ensure that what we have said in this House is implemented by the executive. A lot of the work that is done here is not implemented. And if you look at this report, that comprehensive report that my chairman has given, it actually tells you that a lot of the things that have been discussed in this Parliament, especially in terms of motions and petitions, have not been implemented. And one of the things that I would like to suggest going forward, that this Parliament needs
to have an act on the Committee of Implementation that gives power to ensure that it can enforce the things that this House passes. Otherwise, without an act of parliament, without proper structuring of the standing orders, people will ignore what parliament does and the power. If we had an opportunity with the chair to visit Zambia. In Zambia, they have a committee of government assurances, that every assurance that government gives in the House is immediately followed. And it leads even to impeachment motions. It leads even to dismissal of executive or ministers, because they take the work of the government assurance very, very seriously. And the Committee of Government Assurances can actually draft an impeachment motion based on the findings that they have and send a minister packing. But what we have here is a whole act of parliament, like Honorable Milia said, act of parliament is passed here, is taken there, it's not implemented. The one that we've been told by Chris Wamalo on fertilizer, it has been passed, it has never been done. I did 2 motions in this House on cashew and coconut, 2 motions. They were passed here. But every time I talk to the minister, why don't you do this? He said, no, this is not a priority. This is not what we want to do. But Parliament had passed a motion on the same. And there's a lot of these things that happen. So what I would like to say, and thank God we have a leader of majority here that listens and is here. And I want to urge you, as we pass these motions and these acts of Parliament and the petitions as reports are tabled here, what we would like to do is that you create a tracking system, that this thing has gone beyond 60 days. It has not been done. Kindly, as clerk's office, inform the Committee of Implementation. What happens, a lot of the work that we have is where members have come to complain that this thing was passed but has never done. But we do not have a proper mechanism where what is passed in this Parliament, after 60 days, it automatically falls on the lap of the Committee of Implementation, so that immediately the committee takes it up and tries to implement it or pushes for implementation. Mr. Speaker, I also want to say this. The Committee of Implementation, where I sit, we have had issues where you call ministers to come and explain certain things, but they feel that they're not responsible to Parliament on the implementation. They think they're only responsible to the President. They cannot come to the Committee of Implementation. You see, the Committee of Implementation, there are only 3 committees that are manned by minority. The PIC, the PAC, and Committee of Implementation. That's how powerful that is. An oversight committee on behalf of Parliament. And that's a very important thing. But what we see is that people and cabinet secretaries and in government do not see that this committee needs to do the work that it's supposed to do. So, Leader of Majority, I will urge you that you liaise with us closely. But lastly, I would also like to say, this is a committee of the minority. The minority leadership should have been here. Should have been here. But today I take over the role of leader of minority in this House.
You can't have. You can't have, because I was set up president. Let's have Honorable Mutua Balasa. Honorable Mutua Balasa took leave. Honorable Justice Kizito.
I want to say that this is a very important committee, and I want to support my colleagues who are saying that this is a very important committee, and whatever we pass in this particular House must be implemented to the latter. And therefore, I would like to ask, even us as chairman of the committees, I think it should be, take it upon us also to keep on following up on also what's supposed to have been passed in our committee so that we can see them implemented. And I want to think that this is a House of Representatives. We represent Kenyans. And at the same time, it's the House that deals with everything that goes with money bills, appropriation bills, and even giving authority to incur expenses, that kind of, and even the budget itself. This House has been given a responsibility of dealing with the matter corruption through its 3 very important committees. That is special funds, that deals with all the funds in this country. We also have public accounts committee that deals with the mainstream fund, the mainstream expenditures and accounts. And also we have a public investment committee This one deals with the parastatals and corporation monies and government investments. More often than not, these committees have done very good recommendations on matter craft. And the Parliament is another arm that is supposed to participate in craft, dealing with the anti-craft arm that is supposed to help these other arms of the government that deal with the craft. But more often than not, I have seen very good recommendation, and especially from PAC, PIC, and special funds. But then I've never seen the DCI of this nation following it up and picking this and using it actually to prosecute, to investigate, prosecute, and actually convict those people who participate in craft and criminal of such activities of that kind of nature. But we have seen a lot of dramas out there, and I can say, Mr. Speaker, this is why it's not easy for this government to convict a single person who has done corruption. Who was I can remember there are quite a number of people who have been there in these offices, and we have never seen them actually prosecuting anybody. It's because they leave Parliament out. Whatever we pass here, they don't take. And you want just to do drama, running up and down, getting people to court. At the end of the day, you have no evidence. But we have a lot of evidence here that can be used if the Committee of Implementation can be followed up, and we follow on our recommendations. It's very possible that we can be able to cut down on this, because the Parliament as an arm of the government, an arm of one of the government, actually has been laid down. I remember me and Kimunya here and others, and I think it's another colleague of mine here, and Mheshimiwa Gaju Ngani and others, I think we're in the 10th Parliament, and that's the time the government used to sit in the House. Government used to sit in the House, and we used to have ministers here and everybody else. So anytime there was that kind of motions, they were taken very seriously and they were followed. So I tend to think that the Committee of Implementation, we want to support you, and we want to give you the tools and impetus to make sure you pursue whenever these recommendations are done that are implementable or are actionable. Please summon these people and let them tell us how they are going to deal with the matters or with the recommendations that have been made by this House, because this House belongs to the people. This House belongs to the people, and it's the people who gave us the mandate to be here and to speak on their behalf. Therefore, whatever that goes through this House must be implemented so that Kenyans can get value for their money. And I want to say it's very important that this committee also has to be tough, and periodically we need to be getting these reports on how they have gone and whatever, so that we also follow up on this as Parliament, as we support this committee, very important committee, very dignified committee indeed, so that it can be able to implement whatever we have passed in this House, because at the end of the day, things don't work. We have seen so many people in acting position in this country, and the committees have been talking this year again and again, and I can give an example of a CEO of a national CDF committee who acted for almost over 10 years. For over 10 years. And the recommendations were done again and again and again and again. Nothing was going on. So I tend to think that the executive must take this House very seriously, because if you don't take this House seriously as an executive or an accounting officer of this nation, I know it can easily pull you down, because you are not working and you are not working for the people. And that's why I want to support BBI, to say that when BBI comes, I think the government must come back to this House so that we can be able.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity to support this motion of our committee on implementation. Mr. Speaker, sir, this is a very important committee. Mr. Speaker, sir, this committee is actually fairly new. It only started in the 11th Parliament, and of course now on the 12th Parliament. This is because in those years, Mr. Speaker, sir, we were able to have the ministers on the floor of the House, this is the 10th Parliament, and we were able to get commitment from the ministers on the floor. And we had sanctions for them if they don't fulfill or go through with their commitment. But under this pressure system of government, we don't have ministers here. We can only ensure that whatever laws and motions we have passed in this House can be fully pursued and commitments made is only through such a committee. Mr. Speaker, sir, then it was actually private members' motions and private members' bills that were actually passed here and we make resolutions as a house, but it's actually all in vain. And that's when we felt that we should have a committee on implementation. For the departmental committees, they are able to pursue their issues, the resolutions with the relevant ministers under their oversight, and they were able to ensure that things were done as per the resolutions. But for private members, for their motions and for their bills, they never had a mechanism to ensure that whatever we pass on the floor of this house is not in vain. And that's why this committee came into being. And I'm sorry to say that even in the 11th Parliament, and even in this Parliament, I'm really yet to see that we have achieved the targets that we wanted to achieve through this committee. Because, Mr. Speaker, sir, we pass resolutions here on the floor. It's owned by the entire House, but there's no mechanism to ensure it's followed and it's actually implemented. Because as a House, we don't make laws or pass resolutions in vain. We have mechanisms for sanctions. You can impeach ministers. You can deny them budgets. You can refuse to pass their policies and legislation on the floor of this House. We can actually refuse as a parliament to deal with them until the resolutions that we have passed there are honored and fully implemented. And this is exactly what this committee is supposed to do. And I didn't kill the report of the chairman. He's my good friend, a very brilliant member of parliament. I've served with him in the same committee in the past. But these are the mechanisms, I think that's there in this House. We are not able to really do what we need to do to ensure that our resolutions are fully implemented by the executive. And if there's need to amend some our standing orders, if there's a need for us to look at our legal framework here, to ensure that whatever we pass on the floor of this House is not in vain, I think we need to really look into this very critically. Mr. Speaker, sir, because as Parliament, we have powers. And those powers, if we really want to exercise it, with the authority that we have, we can actually ensure that whatever we pass on the floor of this House are actually honored, and government, rather the executive, commits to it. But it's not happening as of now. And I really want to also appeal to the leader of majority, who is also a key member of the House Business Committee, to actually give the report of this committee the necessary time it needs for us to discuss their issues and their reports on the floor of this House. Because it's only through this committee that whatever members want to do for this country, through their motions, through their private initiatives, whether they are bills, whether they are questions that they ask, or whether they are through even petitions, that actually something can be done about it. And as a committee on implementation, please also come with sanctions. You have teeth to bite. Let's bite where necessary. Even if it means deny them budgets, even if it means impeaching some of them, or making some serious sanctions on some ministers and state corporations that fail to honor what we do. As a House to be effective and to be taken serious by the executive arm of the government, we really have to empower this committee. And it's critical for this House, it's particularly under this system of governance, under the presidential system of governance. I really want to support this committee, and I really hope going forward, this committee will really live up to its task and be able to be effective and enable us to realize the objective for which we established this committee in the 11th Parliament. I wish to support, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Honorable Adagala.
It has come to me, Honorable Speaker.
No, you're actually next, Honorable Angwe. But first, we shall have Honorable Adagala.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, for giving me this opportunity to also voice on this Committee of Implementation, which has done a very good job, and we've been wondering actually what's happening on some of the bills that pass through this Parliament. We normally don't see them being implemented. I want to concur with the others, my colleagues who have talked about it. I think this committee, chairman and team, you've done a good job, and you should continue. We have to monitor what we pass here, if it is being implemented or not. Like in the case of the village elders, most of them, wherever you go to the county, they keep on asking. We heard you people talking about as being remunerated by the government, at least a small token. What has happened to that? They keep on asking. And even the other day also, the staff of Postal Corporation, they kept on ringing me. We heard you talking about our salaries. Are we getting money or not? So, Mr. Chairman and the team, members of that committee, please, as the House debate on matters of bills and other motions, please make a follow-up and ensure they are implemented to the latter for people or for the people of Kenya to have confidence in this House. Because we have seen several cases, and even including court orders, are never followed. So what is passed in this House should be taken as law and should be implemented with the urgency it deserves. Therefore, I'll support this committee for the good work. Keep up. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Honorable Wangwe. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, allow me to really appreciate the report and thank the chair and the vice chair, my good friends, the lawyer, Honorable Kenta, and Honorable Soti, and the team as a whole. Honorable Chair, Honorable Speaker, this report is good, and especially I support it because of its ability in terms of measurability. The committee has compared and brought a very strong element of quality into perspective, Honorable Speaker, whereby this House has been challenged, Honorable Speaker, that both the Secretariat and the members should be able now, Honorable Speaker, to put their heads together and really debate a matter on the floor or the bill or motion in its quality form, Honorable Speaker. And when the committee has picked up a point, Honorable Speaker, that the executive is challenging in terms of saying that this comparison, this report is not compatible with a certain element in terms of maybe in terms of law or in terms of the regulations that they have, that the motion is not in tandem or it's not as per the act as it is, Honorable Speaker. Therefore, Honorable Speaker, what it means is let this House now look at each and every motion, in as much as we support the motions to be debated, but let's look at it in terms of the quality and measurability compared to the existing laws, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I want to thank the committee that they have brought up a very serious issue, the issue of village elders, Honorable Speaker. They have picked up the issue as having come into this House for the first time in 2008. Honorable Speaker, those are 12 years ago. To date, I have the benefit of having been in this House in last session, last Parliament, and the Member for Parliament for Malava brought it up again as a motion. It was debated and passed. To date, Honorable Speaker, we are in the 12th Parliament, and today, so far, village elders are not still earning anything from the national government. What does it mean, Honorable Speaker? It's a challenge to the Committee on Implementation, which I would want to ask them, that if they get such a challenge, Honorable Speaker, let them now revert back to the House and come with an act, a bill, Honorable Speaker. Since the two were motions, both by Honorable Amalwa in 2008 and by Honorable Malulu in the 11th Parliament, let the committee now give us a bill which we can debate and put it into the act so that, Honorable Speaker, we now lower from the sub-chief, we get a cadre to employ in the civil service who could either earn honorary or earn some allowance so that our village elders, Honorable Speaker, can as well have something to take home. Honorable Speaker, I want to thank the committee very strongly that it is being handled very well. For the first time, Honorable Speaker, in the 11th Parliament where I served with Honorable Kenta, he'll agree with me that this committee was one of the very least expected strong committees. Today, Honorable Speaker, Honorable Kenta is comfortable to sit because the report he has brought on the floor is very good and is very encouraging to all of us, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, we come to this House courtesy of Article 95 of the Constitution, which gives us the power to legislate, represent, and, Honorable Speaker, oversight. Honorable Speaker, Every Wednesday has been a day set aside for in the morning for private members' bills. Now we have set it aside on Thursdays. That means, Honorable Speaker, that all members are happy and anxious to make sure they legislate on their behalf and the behalf of their members, the voters, Honorable Speaker. If you legislate and what you have put onto legislation cannot be implemented, Honorable Speaker, it is discouraging. Therefore, I want to encourage the Committee on Implementation that you are doing us a good job. You are our point people. You are our point committee outside there. And we will endeavor, Honorable Kenta and your committee, to support you in every way to make sure that all matters that shall have been debated on the floor, legislated in terms of bills or motions, what you require from us, we will support you. Honorable Speaker, I beg to support.
Honorable Ogutu Abel.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I want to start by saying that I'm very impressed with the report from one of the committees that for a long time that Honorable Speaker have thought has done disservice to this House. The Committee on Implementation is like the yardstick to the performance of this Honorable House. Mr. Speaker, we spend a lot of time here passing bills and motions, but there's no way we can be able to measure our success until we are informed on the progress on the implementation of these bills. And it is for this reason, Honorable Speaker, that I say that I'm very impressed for the first time being in this House close to 3 years now, that I'm getting a feeling that a committee somewhere is tracking on our performance. 2 areas, Honorable Speaker, that I want to focus on. Number one, I could like the budget of this country to be able to indicate to us among the new items that are being funded, how many of them are recommendations from this August House. That's very important. Because I've learned, Mr. Speaker, that some of the technical staff take this parliament for granted. They will do their own things being the things that don't include the bills that have been passed by this parliament. So I think the best could be that we get an impression on how much change we are making because of seeing the technical team putting a budget for implementation of the bills and the motions that have been discussed in this House. The second thing is that, as members have already discussed, we need a clear tracking system, easier to follow, easier to probe, indicating from the different committees the bills and their status and the motions, and also where there have been challenges. That way, Honorable Speaker, progress in transforming this country. Otherwise, as our honorable members have already said, there may be bills and motions that were discussed about 2 parliaments ago that could be still be hanging because nobody has picked them up. Honorable Speaker, I want to say that I thank this committee and indeed support the first report they are giving, and also realize that it's important for these changes to take place in committees, because a new blood brings in new emotions. And that I would like to see through the business committee that this particular committee on implementation gives us a status report on a quarterly or so basis, so that we are able to see what difference we are making in terms of translating what we discuss into actions. Honorable Speaker, I support.
Honorable Oduol Adhiambo.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, on the onset, I'd like to thank the Committee on Implementation for indeed bringing very clear issues that are actionable, Honorable Speaker. I note in particular that in the recommendations, Honorable Speaker, the committee would want to seek that we get clear legislative and legislation framework. And I want to start, Honorable Speaker, by indicating that because this is a committee that by its nature is intended to follow the resolutions that are passed by this House to ensure that they are indeed put into action, that we could establish and consider, Honorable Speaker, having a monitoring and evaluation unit or office that is domiciled here in Parliament, and which would, Honorable Speaker, serve the same purpose as the Budget Office, because it would allow the relevant liaison and in particular allow the committee to then be in a position to not only follow but to link in a manner that is strategic and workable. Honorable Speaker, on the second note, also to look at the manner in which at times what is resolution that is passed here in this House is regarded as not really in line with policy of government. It is something that would be useful to verify, because, Honorable Speaker, by virtue of the role of this House, as the House passes resolutions and the House seeks to provide direction in terms of not only legislation but oversight, it is important that, Honorable Speaker, this can then be taken into account. And, Honorable Speaker, one particular aspect also would be noting the recommendation that by the committee that we would want to improve that the resolutions that are passed are smart, that is, they are specific, they are measurable, achievable, results-oriented and time-bound. It would be useful, Honorable Speaker, that the committee, as I think has been already raised, would give a sense of what it is that the resolutions would need to look like for them to be what would pass effectively. Finally, Honorable Speaker, I think as we look at the different houses, the different arms of government, judiciary, legislature, and executive, it is this committee, Honorable Speaker, that would enable us to not only redeem the right position of the legislature, but to ensure that we manage areas that would provide some challenge. Honorable Speaker, it is clear that Parliament observes sub judice. We do not discuss anything, Honorable Speaker, that is before the courts. And Honorable Speaker, it is clear that sometimes part of the challenge comes when the judiciary sometimes interferes with valid matters that are before this House. And so I want to thank the committee and indeed, Honorable Speaker, to say that it is a committee that would give Parliament an opportunity to truly serve its role and to be in the driving seat in terms of ensuring that work that Parliament does is not in vain. Honorable Speaker, with this, I'd like to support.
Honorable Mumanyi, member for Nyamira. Yes, there you go.
Honorable Speaker, I want to thank you for also giving me this opportunity so that I can also contribute to this report. First of all, I want to thank the Chair, Honorable Kenta, and the Vice, Mr. Sosi, for giving us a very comprehensive report, which is giving this House the impetus of continuing to do the work that they are doing. Honorable Speaker, this House is the most honored in the country, and it's the one which influences mostly what takes place in our country. And what takes place comes through legislation that we do in this House. Mr. Speaker, if what we do is not implemented, then the work of the House cannot be respected at any other time. We want to say that this House has done a lot of registrations. Since I came, I have also participated in some, especially the one which they have enumerated of village elders. And actually, whenever we are out there, the village elders are always asking that we saw you people discuss a bill which was going to affect our lives. What happened? Those are questions that they ask. And if some of these bills that we pass are never implemented, even our people may never take us serious. For us to be taken serious, and for the country to know that this is the honorable house from where all the bills that affect, all the laws that affect our country comes, then they have to be implemented. And I know, Mr. Speaker, when a law takes all the processes and it is assented to, I don't think there are areas which can make maybe the executive or any arm which is supposed to implement to say that the law is not implementable unless it is against the Constitution of Kenya. We know that the secretariat that we have, they also guide, because we have also lawyers here, they guide us on the type of registration that we make. So when we get reports that some of our registration are not implemented and that there are views which are being given that we do not even understand ourselves, that means it is the House which is not taken serious. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to support this report. We want to give the committee energy so that it can continue making sure that what we discuss, what we deliberate in this House is implemented. That is when we will represent our people well. That is when the views of our people will be heard, and that is when their views will affect and influence them. Mr. Speaker, I support and I congratulate the committee for the good work that they have done.
Honorable Oudo Ojiabo.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I was getting worried because probably I thought my card has gotten lost. But let me take this opportunity to join my colleagues to thank the Committee of Implementation on their report in respect of the various petitions, reports, and legislations, recommendations, and action points that the 12th Parliament has passed since we started. Honorable Speaker, it's indeed unfortunate that we are mandated to legislate, we are mandated to oversight, we are mandated to prepare budgets for the purpose of running this country. Indeed, it's unfortunate that we do all this, but the most saddest part of all, that many times the executive and all other bodies routinely ignore the edicts or the resolutions of this House, making the House look as if it's a mere talking point. Indeed, I hope we could find as a House collectively to find mechanisms to ensure that all resolutions, unless set aside by another competent authority, that's the judiciary, should be implemented without debate, without question, and within the reasonable period of time. Honorable Speaker, it indeed it's very discouraging that a member of this House spends a substantial amount of time to research, prepare a motion, bring it here for debate, convinces colleagues, they approve the motion or they pass the motion, and the last thing you hear about it is that acclamation of the yes and the nays. And that's the end of the story. It's indeed discouraging, and it sends a wrong picture on the effectiveness of Parliament. I join the chorus on my colleagues that we must find a mechanism of enforcing whatever we pass here.
so that we do not legislate in vain. On the other side of the story, Honorable Speaker, we members, we must appraise ourselves on government policies, appraise ourselves on existing legislation, appraise of ourselves of the prevailing economic situation, so that we do not propose motions that very well you know have got no capacity of being implemented, or they run counter to existing government policy, which yourselves here debate and approve. Honorable Speaker, probably it's also important that we strengthen our secretariat, the clerk's office, and all those who serve us in one way or the other. Whenever they tell us this, they should be able to review government policy, existing conditions, and advise us whether the motion that we are proposing to move, whether it is workable or is implementable or not. Probably on that score, Honorable Speaker, there could be probably a suggestion to have a committee or a certain department within the office of the clerk or whatever it could reside to provide some form of monitoring and evaluation so that there is a proper link between the members of parliament and what's happening in the executive, so that we do not make a mockery of ourselves and legislate in vain. Indeed, it is a shame, and as we support this report, we sincerely need a little more stronger legislative framework to enable us implement what we pass. As we conclude, Honorable Speaker, earlier in the day, of course, there was that debate about Infotrack. Of course, again, we have spoken. We hope we'll move to the point of putting in place relevant legislation to really avoid a situation where we embarrass everybody who has undertaken research before. A survey should be taken truly as a survey. Indeed, in a composite regime like what we are working on, asking one simple statement that offer your opinion on a scale of 1 to 10, disregarding the various roles of Member of Parliament, is indeed indigenous and unethical insofar as research is concerned. With those few remarks, I support.
Honorable Muchangi.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to support the work done by the Committee on Implementation. And I want to thank the Honorable Kenta for the work well done. Mr. Speaker, this Committee of Parliament is a very important committee. And the resolutions that are passed in this House as well are very important for this country. For this House is a very, very important institution. Mr. Speaker, I recall a couple of months ago, like I have heard a number of members say, we passed a motion regarding the remuneration of village elders. And I can say, like in my constituency, I have approximately almost around 500 village elders. And one question that they keep on asking me every day, every other week when we meet, is when are they going to be rewarded for the work that they do for this country? So, Mr. Speaker, I agree with the members here that we need to have a way of ensuring that whatever resolutions we have, whatever motions we have in this House are implemented without delay. It must not be in vain, Mr. Speaker, that we legislate. It must not be in vain that we pass motions or reject others. We should see whatever we resolve here being implemented for the benefit of our country. So I support and thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Ibrahim Sahar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. Mr. Speaker, I rise on a point of order 95 because the motion is straightforward and the members are repeating themselves. Can the mover be called? Thank you.
She is not out of order herself for having asked that. When a member license on that point of order. But the good news is that it's not the Speaker to determine, it is the House to determine. And I would like to establish the mood of the House on this one, that the mover now be called to reply. We as many as are of that opinion say aye. We as many as are of the contrary opinion say nay. The nays have it, but there are just a few anyway. There are not actually very many members. We have 3 or 4. Let's hear them. Honorable Maje.
Thank you, Speaker, for giving me this chance also to put a word into it and say that this is a committee that ensures what the House decide is implemented. Otherwise, without this committee, the House can register it in vain. Speaker, I tend to think this is what has been happening all along, where a House come up with a resolution or a report, and then after that, it is put in the shelves and it is never implemented. So it is a committee that makes sure that at least it tracks what the House decide. For example, if there is an act that has been passed by Parliament, then it is the work of this committee to make sure that it is implemented on the ground. Also, if there is a petition that is done by Kenyans through this House, it is the committee to check whether the same has been implemented, and any other resolution that is done in this particular House. The key thing is, while tracking what has been implemented and what has not been implemented, the implementing officers should not shy off this committee, because you see, the work of this committee should be to make sure that, or to check whether what the people decide, because we represent the people, is implemented, because actually we are here on behalf of the people. And if they are not able to implement because of maybe some shortcomings in the resolution, they should come to the committee and explain to what level they are able to implement and at what level they are not able to implement. So I tend to think also it is a good tool for registration, for executive, to make sure that at least it uses this committee to also question whether some officers who are supposed to implement on the ground are doing the same. Mr. Speaker, I realize that also when we are debating, we should also come up with resolutions that are implementable to some extent, because you might find that the resolutions that are made, some of them in this House, cannot be implemented, given the budget that is the country has. And also, given the process of budgeting in this particular country, you might come up with a resolution that requires some large amount of money to implement. So it becomes also sometimes difficult for these officers to implement. So I tend to think it should also be in phase. We should come up with good recommendations that are implementable on the ground, that are not general in nature. For example, if you want something implemented, the resolution or the recommendation should be such a thing should be implemented within that particular time. But when you leave it open, the officer can come before the committee and say the process is still on because it is not time-bound. So I tend to think also we should check on that to make sure that at least the implementation is in phase. And also, we have to make sure that at least the committee does not operate like any other oversight committees. We have departmental committees in this House. For example, if you take a committee like Committee of Energy, the Committee of Energy should check whether the sector is being done correctly. But the Implementation Committee should not operate as if it is oversighting that particular ministry. What it is supposed to do is to make sure that it calls the officers only to check at what level the implementation has been done. So lastly, before I sit down, I want to say, in this country, we have so many reports of Parliament, especially reports of Public Accounts Committee and reports of PIC. If they are implemented to the fullest, I think we can make a very big step in this country to make sure that at least what has been recommended is done. So I support this report. Thank you.
Honorable Ochada.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, from onset, I think it's important that the whole country recognizes that the best way in terms of how we can monitor and see exactly what we do is through this implementation committee. It's so vital to us. And this is the only committee that can follow up in terms of what we do. And there are very many things that we do as a House. Mr. Speaker, resolutions of the House may not be restricted to reports and to petitions and to motions. I think this is where, as a House, we really need to go beyond what we are doing, and maybe the Committee of Implementation may want to look at this. You realize that each and every sitting of this House, there are the clear-cut agenda that are brought in the name of order of the day. So all those things, by the end of it, generates, apart from oath and all this, the first 2 or 3, all the others generates resolutions of the House. And once they generate resolutions of the House, including some of the decisions that are brought around by the Speaker. So we have a whole range of agenda that generates resolutions of this House. I'm convinced that some of these are still not yet in the hands of the Implementation Committee. Not because they are not doing it, but sometimes because of our procedures or because of some of the things that we have not set up properly, Mr. Speaker. Many times there are responses from ministries here. We give them time. Members raise questions. Ministries commit. They are read back here by the chair of the committees, and they indicate clearly that this and that and that and that is going to happen, or this will happen in this kind of a time frame. That, in my view, is a resolution of the House. So how many of those do we have to get to the Implementation Committee? Because this idea of chasing ministries is just too much. And Mr. Speaker, I think we need to get away of how this either needs to be stopped because it doesn't work. All of us members are running around corridors in ministries single day and out. And yet, we are raising questions here. And those questions are responded to. After the response, no action. So when there's no action, you have nowhere else to go to. So in my view, Mr. Speaker, these are things that need to get to the Implementation Committee. CSS and whoever are called in the committee meetings, to answer in committees. Members are called that so-and-so in charge of transport is appearing in the Committee of Transport and stuff like that, appear. When you appear, they respond, and once they respond, that's the end of it. So how do we connect? Because most of the questions that individual members raise are issues that really concern their constituencies, are issues that are concerning the people that they represent almost directly. They are not as general as reports. They are not as general as many other motions. So that's one thing that I've observed, Mr. Speaker, that we need to check as a House. The other thing that we need to check as a House is the motions. The motions don't go through the normal process like bills. Bills go through a journey and a scrutiny and stages and it's really checked. Motions don't go through that, including coming up with a legislation that will attract or has what we call the money element in it. We have to go to the Budget Committee and all that, and you'll be advised that for sure this bill of yours has an indication that is going to need money for purpose of implementation. We don't do that in motions. So members are actually bringing motions here that in real sense are unimplementable. And I can give an example. In the last House, we did a motion here, passed with a very serious acclamation, that each and every constituency 20 kilometers of a tar road. When this motion was taken, when the minister at that particular time was brought to appear before the committee why this had not been done, he said, you people passed a motion, but you didn't place money for that 20 kilometers per road. So it went round that by the end of the day, it is Parliament that didn't know what they were doing. You pass a motion, and you fail to place money for the motion that you have passed because it is you and it is this House that does the budget. So, Mr. Speaker, at that level, we have a gap that needs to be fixed. That whenever we are bringing in a motion, can our motion be tracked and go through the due process like the bills? Let them go through all these stages, and the movers or the proposers
Your slot is gone, but the clerk, please remember to notify the member when the time is near ending. Honorable Obo Mohammed.
Asante Bwana Spika kunipatia nafasi na mimi kuchangia. Mimi kwanza ningependa moja kwa moja niunge mkono kamati. Hizi tukiuliza maswali au tukiweka petition huwa kuna sababu ya kufanya sisi tufanye hivyo. Baada ya kuweka ikiwa hakuna linalofanyika basi huwa zile sababu zetu hazijapata suluhisho. Kwa hivyo ni muhimu ikiwa tumeuliza maswali yakijibiwa yenye kufuatilizia ile shida iliyoko kule mashinani au huduma kwa mwananchi ipate kuweza kupatikana. Pia naweza kusema tu kidogo ni kwamba saa nyingine inafanyika lakini inachukua muda kufanyika. Pengine hata pahali imekuja kufanyika inakuwa sasa imepitwa na wakati. Kwa mfano tukiuliza maswali kidogo pengine wakati huo ni msimu wa matikiti watermelon, ukipigiuliza swali by the time imekuja kushughulikiwa ile msimu umeisha kabisa. Sasa ile swali kama alikuwa umeuliza na halikuwa na maana. Kwa hivyo sitaki kuchukua muda mwingi, nilisikia hapa ni watu watatu na alikuwa tunasema tumpatie move aendelee. Sitaki kuchukua muda, acha nikome hapa tupate tuendelee. Asante.
Very well. Honorable Musimba Patrick.
Thank you, Speaker, for according me this opportunity. And indeed, from the onset, is just to encourage and thank our colleague, Honorable Olekenta, and the committee for such a robust report. But what is of note, Mr. Speaker, is that Parliament is at the advent of being taken literally for granted, because we are indeed anchored in the Constitution 2010. And it's our functions here, or the functions bestowed upon the executive in terms of implementing our legislative petitions from this House and indeed our motions, is not a request, and one cannot hide under technicalities. I will draw up on the functions of His Excellency the President in Article 132 of the Constitution, the last part, which is Part C, which requires the President every year to bring forth reports about the implementation of national values. His Excellency the President, since 2013, has done that to a fault, has never faltered. If we fast track downwards, and we are looking at a framework, the framework is already within our Constitution. This is in Article 153, sub-Article 4, which bestowed upon every Cabinet Secretary of the Republic of Kenya to periodically furnish the House with reports on the progress of what is going on in their docket. And I believe, other than the Office of the Leader of Majority, the Committee of Implementation has to utilize this particular clause in the Constitution to ensure every Cabinet Secretary actually tables reports every quarter, not only about motions or legislations, but also on matters which are before the departmental committees for further interrogation by the House. Why do I say this? Parliament does not act in a vacuum. We act to implement the agenda of bringing Kenya forward in improving the lives and livelihoods of Kenyans. We have an MTP framework which is targeted towards achievement of Vision 2030 and the greater goal of achieving the Sustainable Development Goals which are set out by the United Nations for posterity of people and citizenry around the world. So when we come up with these motions, indeed, and petitions, it is in response with what is in society. So the committee has to act actively, and I've never seen since 2013, maybe only 1 or 2 cabinet secretaries when they are caused, and mostly this is, under the committee of PAC or PIC, where every single departmental parastatal is required to place their accounts and how they're utilizing funds. And this is done religiously. Whenever we're going towards budgets, the executive, the judiciary, and indeed Parliament through the Parliamentary Service Commission, never missed the deadline on the dot. So the committee has to be encouraged to now enforce, either through the Secretary of Cabinet, so that we have a mechanism where every quarter we are able to write also to the Secretary to the Cabinet for forward implementation or recommendation to His Excellency the President of saying the following Cabinet Secretaries of yours are falling behind in keeping pace with the resolutions of the House. So that by the time we are talking as a House about either removing a Cabinet Secretary, it's all founded within proper framework. And I believe this was the intention when the Honorable Raphael Tuju was being appointed to become a Cabinet Secretary with portfolio to specifically deal with Parliament. That was, I think, the thinking. So we need to pursue that so that we have periodic reports which go back through the Committee of Implementation and indeed our Speaker or the Clerk that says to them that so far this hasn't been done. And I will go back also to memory lane, Mr. Speaker. If we had implemented, say, the CIHs or the laptop programs and we had followed it to a nut, when such a pandemic as COVID would have hit us, we would have been better prepared as a nation. And this is alive. These are resolutions of this House that we go forth. How efficiently are we applying the funds that we utilize within the departmental committees so that in event somebody has gone to court, Mr. Speaker, I'll ask for intelligence for just another minute, tafadhali. Kindly, Mr. Speaker.
For your minute, as you plead.
Yeah, but it's part of the reach out to you. Just a minute, Mr. Speaker. So what I'm saying is, in events, for instance, we've allocated money to do a certain road, and the contractors either go to court. That money doesn't remain idle. The House is able...
You have the minute.
Very much.
But conclude within the minute.
Thank you very much. I'm coming to a close. So that then the departmental committees, or indeed the budget committee, is able to reassign the money through a supplementary budget as opposed to waiting towards the end for this to happen. All in all, I want to thank and encourage the committee for the good work they continue to do, and as we move this country forward. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Members, there being no further interest to speak to this, I shall call the mover to reply. Honorable Ole Kenta.
Honorable Speaker, I beg to reply and thank the members for their contributions. There are some issues which I really need to clarify, Honorable Speaker. One of them is that some members have got a perception that this is the first report we have tabled. In fact, Honorable Speaker, we have tabled more than 10 reports. In fact, 12 to be exact. We had one that we did in 2018 on omnibus like this. We have several very important ones like the sugar, like one touching on the sugar industry, and several others. Unfortunately, we do not control the calendar of the House. We do not control which debates are brought before the House. And in fact, we had to write and protest to the House Business Committee for us to have even gotten this opportunity. So in fact, I'm happy that today the leader of government business has actually confessed that maybe the delay in the tabling and debating of these reports are not really squarely, we are not to blame. However, in fact, I'd like to request this House, because you have said that you'll support this committee, that we be given an opportunity at least every fortnight to brief the House on the implementation of several laws and motions and everything else. Why am I saying this? Members are also saying that the government or the executive has not been implementing the decision of this House. If that were the case, then I think this country will not be functioning. Whereas maybe there are 2 or 3 issues that have not been sorted out by the government. Hundreds of them have actually been implemented. Because we will not have a government, we will not have anything if they are not implemented. So I would like to advise the House that it's not that the government or the executive has not implemented anything. Let us also appreciate that they have actually implemented a lot. Honorable Speaker, the other issue I'd like to raise is in regards to departmental committees. You see, this committee is supposed to address the implementation status after 60 days. Like, for example, let's take the issue of the COVID-19. The COVID-19 issue was brought before this House, and we were asked questions about implementing, the the financing and all that. That was not our role, honestly. It was supposed to be the Department Committee on Health. So you'll find that members erroneously believe that we are actually supposed to do things on our own motion. No, it is after the House has deliberated and resolved. The other issue is the issue of cabinet secretaries. I'd like to assure this House that several CSs have appeared before us. They have actually given their side of the story. They've given us data, and they've done those reports. And I want to put this on record. We do not have any CS who has failed or refused or neglected to appear before our committee, before this committee. However, there are times when there are delays. But that's understandable, and we sometimes quarrel with them, but they try. The only thing I like to request this House is that we can sometimes come to you to sanction a cabinet secretary who has been unable or who has refused to appear before us. And that one we shall do. And not just before our committee, but for failing to implement the resolutions of the House. However, we must also be alive to the fact that you might pass a motion here that actually has budgetary allocation, budgetary implications. How do you expect the cabinet secretary to implement that resolution, like for example, the one of the elders, which is very popular, without having a legal framework? I remember here I said that the Committee on Implementation should actually have a report on it, or have a law or a bill. But that is not our role. That's the role of the Ministry of Interior and National Coordination, because it comes under them. So, Honorable Speaker, I would like to say that we shall do our best, but I'd like to request the Business Committee to schedule all our reports for hearing, and we should actually for debate, and we shall actually ensure that this House does not act in vain. So, Honorable Speaker, I beg to move. Thank you. I beg to reply.
Very well. Honorable members, you prepared putting the question on that particular order. Next order.
Order number 9, the Public Participation Bill, National Assembly Bill number 69 of 2019, second reading.
Chairperson, Committee on Parliamentary Broadcasting and Library. Yes, that
thank
must
you.
be Honorable Kizito.
Yes, thank you.
Please, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Speaker, for giving this opportunity to present our bill. Now, this is my first one, the maiden one. So I must first of all thank the Parliament and the leadership of the two sides of the Parliament for giving me an opportunity to serve on the side of the majority and the broadcasting as a chair, together with my vice chair, who is here, also ready, able lady, who is also ready to second. Now, I would like to go straight to the...
You moved for the second reading. That is...
No, I want to do that now.
Phrase.
Yeah, so now, Honorable Speaker, I beg that the Public Participation Bill... I beg to move, Yeah, I beg to move, Mr. Speaker. I beg that the Public Participation Bill, National Assembly Bill number 69 of 2019, be read now a second time. Honorable Speaker, the Public Participation Bill 2019, a bill of an Act of Parliament, sponsored by the Committee on Parliamentary Broadcasting and Library, was read first time on 29th October 2019 and subsequently referred to the Committee of Parliamentary Broadcasting and Library for consideration, and thereafter report to the House, which we are doing now. The principal objective of this bill is to provide a framework for effective public participation. The Constitution of Kenya 2010 ushered in a new system of governance that places the people at the center of governance. Accordingly, all public processes, ranging from policy making, legislative process, and ultimate decision making, require the participation of the people of Kenya. That our Constitution actually put everything around the person, the public, so the public has a say on everything that we do, And this one actually is ushered. I can put that it comes from even God himself when he made man to be at the center of the universe, and that is the anthropocentric position that man was given in the universe. So therefore, our good constitution follows that. The bill therefore proposes to provide a mechanism of facilitated, effective, and coordinated public participation. The bill accordingly gives effect to the constitutional principles of public participation and participatory democracy. Mr. Speaker, this one is reflected and deeply embedded in our Constitution, Article 1 of the Constitution, Article 10A, Article 10.2, subsection paragraph 2, Article 35, Article 69, Article 111, Article 174, Article 184, Article 196, Article 201, and Article 232 of the Constitution. The bill provides for preliminary matters, including the short title, objective of the Act, and the guiding principles that guide public participation. The bill also designates the responsibility authorities for purposes of developing institution-specific guidelines for public participation, and also designates responsible public participation officers. Public participation processes are different in all institutions, and therefore the bill recognizes these differences and designates responsible authorities for purposes of developing the specific guidelines and offering oversight for public participation. Mr. Speaker, the bill also requires the responsible authorities to develop specific guidelines within a stipulated timeline. It provides for the development of the guidelines which must be in line with the general guidelines provided in the schedule to the bill. The bill also proposes that each responsible authority must budget for expenditure pertaining public participation in the annual estimates. Further, for accountability, every responsible authority is required to include in its annual report an outline of activities and outcomes of public participation. Statement on the delegation of legislative powers and limitation of rights and fundamental freedoms. The bill delegates legislative powers to the Attorney General to make regulations for the better carrying into effect of the provisions of the bill. The bill does not limit any of the rights and the fundamental freedoms contained in the Bill of Rights in the Constitution. This bill seeks to provide a national framework for public participation. Public participation is a constitutional requirement at all levels of government, that is national government and county government. The bill therefore concerns county governments in terms of Article 110, stroke 1, subsection A of the Constitution, in that it contains provisions that affect the functions and powers of the county governments as set out in 4th schedule to the Constitution. What's the Constitution? It is worth noting, Mr. Speaker, that also this bill, when it comes into becoming an act, it will also invoke money. It will be like a money bill also. In the enactment of this bill shall occasion additional expenditure of public funds. Remember, we had indicated that in the bill, we indicate that every institution that has to participate in the whatever they do, we have to have the money. We have to have money. We have to set aside money that will facilitate the public participation, which is very, very highly and fully embedded in our Constitution throughout. Because whatever we do, we must be live to that. Honourable Speaker, in considering the bill, the committee carried out an extensive public participation process where an advert was placed in the local dailies on 11th November 2019. The committee further invited key stakeholders to submit their views on the bill. Committee held public county forum meetings with stakeholders from Kakamega, Mombasa, Kilifi, Busia, Garissa, Mwingi, Nyamira, Narok, and Nakuru counties, whereby the public gave their views on the bill. The committee noted that all were in support of the bill. The committee received and analyzed the memoranda for the following stakeholders: Sauti ya Wanjiku Organization, Council of Governors, the Institute of Social Accountability and Natural Justice. Mr. Speaker, I take this opportunity to thank the Office of the Speaker, the Office of the Clerk, the Office of the Leader of Majority, members of Committee on the Parliamentary Broadcasting and Library, and Secretariat of Committee for their dedication and support during the process of this bill. I further wish to appreciate all the stakeholders of their input. I therefore urge all the honorable members to participate in discussing this important bill to help us come up with a more solid and resolute document that is going to guide public participation. Mr. Speaker, with those few remarks, I beg to move, and I therefore ask Honorable Jerusha to second. Thank you.
Honorable Jerusha, is that Honorable Momanyi? Yes.
Honorable Speaker, I beg to second that the Public Participation Bill, National Assembly Bill number 69 of 2019, be read a second time, simply because, Mr. Speaker, we know the principal objective of this bill is to provide a framework for effective public participation, Mr. Speaker. We are all aware that the 2010 Constitution brought in a new system of governance, whereby the people of Kenya are placed at the center of every governance that takes place within the institutions of within the public institutions in Kenya. Accordingly, Mr. Speaker, all public processes, which include policy making, legislative processes, and even decision-making, Mr. Speaker, the people of Kenya must be involved. And for them to be involved, and for the participation to be well coordinated, this bill, Mr. Speaker, proposes that the public participation has to take place. And, Mr. Speaker, those who are going to participate, they are going to be given guidelines, especially any authority which is going to have public participation. They are going to be given guidelines on how to do it, more especially when the Attorney General is going to give registrations which are going to guide every institution, Mr. Speaker. We know that in Kenya, people have been enlightened. It's only that the bill has not been put in place so that we have well-coordinated participation within our institutions. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the members who came before us. As you know, we are new in this committee, me and my chair, but the member of this committee had done a lot to make sure that this bill comes into being, and today I am seconding that this bill is accepted and debated so that it can go out there and assist our entities as they undertake their public participation. So, Mr. Speaker, I second.
Honorable members, I hope honorable members do appreciate the importance of this bill. You know, there has been many questions around how practical the aspirations of public participation as captured in the Constitution. And the bill tries to break down those aspirations. Very, very important. Allowed public participation as a principle and a policy as envisioned in the Constitution. Anyway, honorable members, I will propose a question, which is that the Public Participation Bill, National Assembly Bill number 69 of 2019 be now read a second time. Shall we start with Honorable Oudo?
Honorable Speaker, thank you for giving me the first chance to contribute on this bill. Honorable Speaker, probably for record purposes, I and you, we sit in a committee called Delegated Legislation, and one of the toughest challenge we continuously face is to determine the adequacy of public participation. Indeed, the Constitution of Kenya is explicitly clear that any matter, be it policy, be it legislation, be it regulations, that affect the people of Kenya in one way or the other, cannot be enacted, cannot be implemented without the public having had a say on exactly what they want to be done. However, the toughest challenge and the biggest question is the definition of public. In the context of any given piece of legislation, subsidiary legislation, or a policy matter, the definition, what constitutes public. Indeed, and it's unfortunate that the bill before us here today does not delve into the specifics of what constitutes the public. Is, for example, a matter dealing with doctors. Is it mandatory that the entire Republic of Kenya must be given an opportunity to contribute or have their say? Is it necessary for a matter dealing with the code of conduct of the judiciary, the judicial officers and the rest, is it a matter to be subjected to the so-called public participation? I do hope at the appropriate stage, during the consideration of this bill, we'll have an opportunity to contextualize and truly define what constitutes public participation. The second point that has always been a big issue to handle is what happens with the views expressed by the public. Is the public authority, as indicated in this act, obliged to consider all views provided or offered by the members of the public? And if indeed that is the case, what will be the end product, considering that quite a number of views are going to be conflicting? At any given time, typical Kenyans will never agree on any particular matter. So it is a matter that we must deliberate and agree. Should we have a threshold that out of 100 submissions made, there are those that will consider, there are those that will not consider? And then what are the frameworks? What are the issues? Honorable Speaker, I have perused through the bill, and one of area that is obvious is going to remain contentious is clause 6, so to speak. And that clause 6 requires that any person purporting to present any memorandum, that any person wishing to state anything that is adverse about somebody or whichever nature must do so by way of a sworn affidavit before attending, and gives timelines, I think, of 30 minutes before then. Honorable Speaker, that particular provision alone is onerous and difficult to implement. It will indeed kill the spirit of public participation. A villager in my constituency of Funyula, in the village of Sidonge, we have gone for public participation, for example, in the CDF projects, asking that particular villager to prepare a sworn statement if he has got a beef to pick with the CDF chair or a PMC committee member, is indeed asking for too much. Yes, it's a good bill. I support the bill, but at the appropriate time, we need to make several amendments to make it reasonable, workable, and capable of achieving the intentions of the particular articles of the Constitution that it seeks to address. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Let's hear from Ibrahim Sahar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. Mr. Speaker, the Constitution of Kenya 2010 gives prominent importance to the public participation. It promotes democracy by providing the citizens with the opportunity to take part in decision-making process affecting them and their community. Mr. Speaker, the space for citizens' state interaction continues to expand. The government and the civil society have gained significant experience deploying participatory tools and approaches for dialogue and engagement. There is need to establish a national structure, effective and coordinated public participation mechanism, which proposed the bill seeks to establish. Mr. Speaker, the proposed bill further designates responsibilities for developing a public participation mechanism respecting and recognizing the different level of government. This seeks to change the narratives and approaches on citizen participation and steer conventional-led approach onto the trajectory that is more impactful and inclusive legal framework. I therefore support.
Honorable Steve from my left, Honorable Musimba.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity. One is to acknowledge your very own words, Speaker, that this is a really momentous bill coming at a really, really important time, because we've seen monumental pieces of legislation which have been produced by this able House being nullified on account of public participation, and them saying it's not enough, there's not enough period. So I think this gives us an opportunity to actually enact to Kenyans and to ourselves a framework that progresses our country. And I will draw where this authority comes from. The preamble to the Constitution of Kenya says as follows: we, the people of Kenya, acknowledging the supremacy of the Almighty God of all creation, honoring those who heroically struggled to bring freedom and justice to our land, proud of our ethnic, cultural, and religious diversity, and determined to live in peace and unity in this indivisible sovereign nation that's called Kenya. That it is important to recognize the sovereign as the person who contributes and enables the daily progress of our nation in terms of contribution of taxes and the smooth sailing of our policies in terms of acceptance and giving the goodwill for us to operate. So in the public participation theory that we've already been doing through our CDF activities, and this has been seamless through this House, we are actually acknowledging the sovereign and the important position they play in the betterment of the nation in terms of serving our lives and livelihoods as we move forward and ensuring and bequeathing to ourselves and the future generations of this nation indeed a smooth time and ensuring that we remain competitive and powerful. So I support the clauses that are here with that particular one about signing the affidavits, within 30 minutes. I think that's monumental. But I think we also bequeath within the same bit the authority to the Attorney General to come up with the active regulations on enactment. My point of call is about the validity across the vein, because what is good for the judiciary, the executive, and parliament might have varying ways of its application. So we need to be able to, either through the Committee of Delegated Legislation or JLAC Committee, be able to see what reports they do generate in accordance to this public participation bill moving forward. And especially when we marry it with things to do with procurement, where we have agencies such as the Public Procurement or Oversight Authority that looks at the processes and the way you appeal towards enabling our projects to be implemented, across the country, to ensure that we actually getting value for money. Because they say where the rubber meets the road is where the shilling and cents applied to this. Because you'll find things which are not to do with budget are treated almost casually. But when it comes to the implementation phase, which is so critical to us, like things to do with the blue economy, implementation, and you see where does Somalia begin, where does Kenya, end, and these become dicey things. That who do we mention as public in terms of participation in those gray underlining areas, or in treaties that we have signed in this House to do with aviation, on our airspaces, and even exploration, in terms of, we have our art stations, which are looking towards, progressively, how do we improve our domination in new areas that are coming through. So this would be interesting areas in terms of definition of who the public is, but I think it's a bill whose time has come, and we'll certainly support it. I thank you. Speaker.
Honorable members, it is 7. The House must rise. But honorable members, there's a provision of 2.5 hours for this bill, so there should be further time for 2 hours, 2 hours, 2 hours and 2.5 hours. But of course, we have spent a few minutes on the same. Honorable members, the time being 7 p.m., this House started adjourned until Thursday, 1st October 2020 at 10 a.m.